One man, one decision, and the fate of every living soul hanging in the balance. It was the early hours of September 26th, 1983. Inside a dimly lit Soviet bunker, alarms began to blare. A red warning light flashed. The computer system screamed that American nuclear missiles were on their way, and they would hit in minutes. The officer in charge, Stanislav Petrov, knew exactly what his orders were. Report it as an attack and prepare for immediate retaliation. But something felt wrong. He stared at the glowing screen, his mind racing. If he followed orders and this was a false alarm, the Soviet Union could launch a nuclear counterattack, triggering a chain reaction that would burn the world to ash. If he ignored it and it was real, his country would be obliterated. In those tense minutes, Petrov made a call that would never be forgotten, even though, for years, the story remained buried in secrecy. If you want more stories the history books left out, hit that subscribe button now, because forgotten history makes unforgettable stories. And what happened that night wasn't just luck. It was the perfect storm of Cold War tension, human instinct, and a billion-dollar system that failed at the worst possible time. To understand the weight of Petrov's choice, we have to go back to 1983, one of the most dangerous years in modern history. The Cold War had been simmering for decades, but now it was near boiling point. The United States, led by President Ronald Reagan, was pouring money into advanced nuclear weapons and calling the Soviet Union an evil empire. Across the ocean, Soviet leader Yuri Andropov was in poor health, but razor-focused on the threat from the West. This wasn't just political posturing. Both sides genuinely believed the other might launch a surprise first strike, and the scale of the weapons was beyond terrifying. Each side had thousands of nuclear warheads. Some were powerful enough to vaporize entire cities in seconds. In November of that year, NATO planned a massive military exercise called Able Archer 83. To NATO, it was just a simulation, but to the Soviets, it looked suspiciously like the perfect cover for a real nuclear attack. It's no exaggeration to say historians now view 1983 as one of the most dangerous years of the Cold War, perhaps even more tense than the Cuban Missile Crisis 2 decades earlier. And in the middle of that volatile atmosphere was a new weapon: early warning satellites. These systems were designed to detect incoming missiles instantly, giving leaders just minutes to respond. But as Petrov would soon learn, no technology is perfect. The Soviet Union's pride and joy at the time was the Oko early warning satellite system. Oko means eye in Russian, and its job was exactly that: to keep constant watch over the skies, ready to spot a missile launch from American soil. Here's how it worked. Satellites equipped with infrared sensors orbited high above the Earth. These sensors could detect the intense heat of a missile launch within seconds. The signal would then be sent to ground-based command centers, where officers like Petrov would verify the alert and pass it up the chain of command. The entire process was designed to take less than a minute. In the Cold War playbook, speed was everything, because a nuclear missile could travel from the US to the USSR in under 30 minutes. That meant any hesitation could be fatal. On paper, it was a brilliant safety net. In practice, it relied on something far more fragile: the assumption that the computers were always right. Petrov was on duty that September night, overseeing the system from the Serpukhov 15 bunker just outside Moscow. His training was clear. If the system detected a launch, his duty was to confirm it and report it. But as the alarms began to sound, Petrov's instincts told him this was no ordinary shift. It was 12:15 a.m. Moscow time when the first alarm went off. Petrov looked at the screen. The computer was reporting a single U.S. intercontinental ballistic missile had been launched toward the Soviet Union. The siren was deafening, the red alert light pulsing. Then came another report, and another. Within seconds, the system was telling him that multiple missiles were inbound. The room tensed. Officers turned toward Petrov, waiting for his call. Protocol demanded immediate escalation. This was, according to the system, the nightmare scenario they had trained for. If he reported this as an attack, Soviet missiles would almost certainly be launched in retaliation. That counterstrike would target American cities, military bases, and missile silos. The US, in turn, would respond with its own arsenal. In short, the end of civilization. But something about the alert didn't make sense. Why would the United States launch just a handful of missiles? A real first strike would involve hundreds, designed to completely cripple Soviet defenses. Petrov's gut told him this was a false alarm. Still, the weight of the decision was crushing. If he was wrong, millions, maybe hundreds of millions, would die. In that high-pressure moment, Petrov decided to go against his training. He called his superiors and told them it was a false alarm. He made that judgment in less than 5 minutes. 5 minutes that decided the fate of the Earth. The tension in the room was unbearable. Officers stared at the screens, half expecting to see impact warnings. But no explosions came. The missile tracks on the radar never appeared. Minutes later, confirmation arrived. There were no missiles. The warning had been wrong. Petrov had just saved the world from a possible nuclear exchange. But the real question remained. How could a billion-dollar defense system make such a catastrophic mistake? The official explanation came later. The Oko satellite had mistaken sunlight reflecting off high-altitude clouds over the United States for the heat signature of missile launches. It was a 1 in a million alignment of the sun, the Earth, and the satellite's orbit, so they say. In other words, bad luck. But bad luck that nearly ended life as we know it. Soviet secrecy meant the full details were kept classified for years. Some experts later speculated that the design of the system itself, rushed into service during the arms race, may have left it vulnerable to false readings. Whatever the reason, it was clear that technology alone couldn't be trusted with decisions of such magnitude. Petrov's skepticism had been the last barrier between a glitch and global catastrophe. You might expect Petrov to be celebrated as a hero, but this was the Soviet Union. Publicly admitting that their state-of-the-art system had failed was unthinkable. Instead, Petrov was questioned, criticized for not following strict procedure, and quietly reassigned. His actions were not widely known, even within military circles. For years, he lived a quiet life in a small town, working at a research institute. The incident remained classified until the late 1990s, when a retired Soviet general mentioned it in a memoir. Only then did the world learn how close it had come to destruction and the man who had stopped it. In the years that followed, Petrov received several international awards, including the World Citizen Award in 2006. He appeared in documentaries, spoke at events, and became a symbol of human judgment prevailing over machine error. Still, accounts suggest he lived modestly, sometimes struggling financially. Some historians speculate that Soviet leadership downplayed his heroism to avoid undermining trust in their military systems. Petrov's story is more than a Cold War anecdote. It's a stark reminder that no matter how advanced our systems become, human judgment is irreplaceable. In a world increasingly reliant on automation and artificial intelligence, the 1983 incident feels eerily relevant. The idea of machines making life and death calls without human oversight should give us pause. Petrov's choice showed that courage isn't always about charging into battle. Sometimes it's about standing still when everything around you says, "Act now." His legacy endures as a quiet warning. Technology can fail, but one person's calm, critical thinking can make the difference between life and death. In the early hours of September 26th, 1983, the fate of the world balanced on a single man's judgment. Stanislav Petrov chose to trust his instincts over a computer system, and by doing so, may have saved hundreds of millions of lives. It's a story that reminds us how fragile peace can be, and how much responsibility can fall on a single pair of shoulders. And it leaves us with one chilling question. If the same alarm sounded today, with artificial intelligence making the call, would humanity be so lucky? This was The Lost Chapter, where forgotten history makes unforgettable stories.